Most defendants quietly accept their punishment and move on. But when Pam Bondi was suddenly hit with an unexpected fine, she didn't just sit back. She struck with such precision that even the judge himself began to question his own ruling. It was supposed to be just another routine day for Pam Bondi. Courtroom 3B, right in the heart of Tampa, was nothing more than a stop on her schedule, a standard hearing that wouldn't even make a dent in her morning. She had stood before countless judges in this very room before, so there was no reason to believe today would be any different. Or so she thought. Seated at the defendant's table, her face remained poised as she skimmed through her notes. Across the room, the city attorney fidgeted, adjusting his tie, shifting in his seat as he waited for the judge's arrival. He had no idea the calm before the storm was about to be shattered. The case? It was supposed to be a minor dispute, a procedural matter that shouldn't have taken more than 10 minutes. But the instant Judge Raymond Dalton entered the room, Pam knew something wasn't right. Dalton was a man who commanded attention without needing to say much. Tall, his graying beard framing deep-set eyes, he carried an air of authority that was impossible to ignore. Normally, judges would take a moment, review the files, acknowledge the attorneys, settle in before making any remarks. Not Dalton. "Let's get right to it," he said, his voice flat, his expression unreadable. Pam straightened slightly, immediately sensing the shift in tone. "The court has reviewed the matter at hand," Dalton continued, "and after considering the arguments, I find that the defendant is in violation of Local Statute 14B. Therefore, a fine of $110,000 is to be paid immediately." Silence. Pam's brow lifted, just slightly, but inside, her mind was already at work. An argument? A discussion? Maybe even a warning? That's what she had expected. But this? A summary judgment, without a single word of debate? The city attorney shot her a glance, almost apologetic. Even he hadn't expected things to move this fast. Pam calmly folded her hands, her voice even. "Your Honor, with all due respect, we haven't even begun proceedings. I haven't had the chance to present my arguments." Dalton barely reacted. "The arguments are irrelevant. The violation is clear. The law is clear." Pam inhaled slowly, keeping her face unreadable. The room was too still. This wasn't about the ruling, no, this was something else. It felt deliberate. This wasn't just about the case, this was about her. She studied Dalton, watching him closely. There was something behind his eyes, something more than just judicial authority. He wasn't merely issuing a ruling, he was making a statement. Her voice stayed measured but firm. "If the law were that clear, Your Honor, we wouldn't be here. I request the opportunity to present my defense." Dalton leaned back slightly, as if he had expected her to push back. The corner of his mouth curled, just barely, into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're welcome to try, Miss Bondi. But I assure you, the outcome will be the same." And that's when she knew this wasn't just about a legal matter. This was personal. Pam adjusted the papers in front of her, more for effect than necessity. The fine itself? That wasn't the issue. She had fought much bigger battles than this. But the principle? That was something she couldn't ignore. She met Dalton's gaze directly. "Then I suppose we should get started." The tension in the room thickened. The city attorney shifted again, uneasy. The court stenographer, silent until now, repositioned in her chair. Even a few spectators in the back leaned forward, sensing that something unusual was about to unfold. Pam took one last glance at the legal brief in front of her. Not that she needed it. She already knew exactly what she was going to do. Dalton thought he had the upper hand. But he was about to find out this wouldn't be as easy as he thought. Before anyone could speak again, Pam raised her hand, a signal that she wasn't finished. And what came next? It left the entire courtroom stunned. She let the silence linger, just long enough to make an impact. No rush. No flinch. She simply turned one page in her folder. Again, more for effect than necessity, before finally looking up at Judge Dalton. "Your Honor, before I proceed, I'd like to clarify something." Her voice was steady, unwavering. "Are you saying the defense has no right to present arguments in a legal proceeding?" Dalton's expression didn't change. I'm saying the violation is clear and the fine stands. Pam tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. Then she nodded. Interesting. Dalton raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Pam leaned back just a little, keeping her tone casual. It's just, I've been practicing law for quite some time. And in all those years, I've never encountered a judge who dismissed a defense before hearing a single word of it. A slight pause. What's the phrase? Oh, unprecedented. Dalton's jaw tightened. Pam knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't outright challenging him. Not yet. But she was setting the stage, forcing him to respond. From the gallery, mostly filled with lawyers and law clerks waiting for their own cases, a few exchanged glances. Even the bailiff, a man who had likely witnessed thousands of hearings just like this, shifted ever so slightly. Dalton let out a slow breath. Miss Bondi, this court does not exist for theatrics. If you have a legal argument, make it. Otherwise, the fine stands and we move on. Pam gave a small, knowing smile. There it was. He'd opened the door. She adjusted her papers once more, but this time, she didn't look down at them. She looked directly at the judge. Very well, she said smoothly. Let's talk about Local Statute 14b, the very one you claim I violated. She tapped her finger on the printed document in front of her. You say the law is clear. But that's interesting, because I happen to know this very statute has been challenged multiple times over the past 5 years, with varying interpretations. Dalton's eyes narrowed. For instance, Pam continued, her voice almost conversational. Subsection C? The language is so vague, it's been ruled unenforceable in at least 3 separate cases. A slight pause. And, let's not forget, just last year, an appellate court found that imposing fines under this statute without due process? She raised an eyebrow. That constitutes a direct violation of constitutional protections. The courtroom? Silent. Pam could feel the shift happening. And the judge? He knew it too. Dalton straightened in his chair, his tone sharpening. Those cases do not apply here. Pam didn't miss a beat. Don't they? She turned another page. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like they do. Dalton clenched his jaw. Pam let that hang in the air for just a second before delivering the next blow. Unless, of course, this court is prepared to disregard established case law, in which case, I'd be happy to file an appeal. Dalton leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. Are you threatening this court with an appeal, Miss Bondi? Pam exhaled through her nose, letting out a quiet laugh. Without amusement. Your Honor, I don't make threats. She met his gaze, unshaken. I cite the law. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. And at that moment, Pam knew she had just shifted the power dynamic. Because now, the judge had no choice but to defend his position. And he knew it too. Pam Bondi sat motionless, her expression unreadable. Across from her, Judge Dalton fixed her with a steady gaze. You believe this fine should be overturned based on appellate precedent. She didn't hesitate. I don't believe it, I know it. A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. Dalton's lips pressed into a thin line. Whitaker, seated beside him, arched an eyebrow. I appreciate your confidence, he said. But let's discuss specifics. You referenced Henderson versus City of St. Petersburg. Are you aware that a follow-up ruling later clarified that certain interpretations of the statute could remain enforceable under localized judicial discretion? Pam kept her expression neutral, but inside, she felt the shift. So that was their play. Dalton had taken a step back, brought in someone with more authority, and now they were attempting to counter her argument with an overlooked technicality. Pam folded her hands. I am aware of that ruling, Your Honor. But I also know that the same clarification explicitly stated that enforcement must adhere to strict evidentiary standards, something that, in this case, was not done. Whitaker nodded slightly, as if he had expected her response. Then let's talk about that. He gestured toward the back of the room. The enforcement officer who filed the violation is present in this courtroom. Would you like to cross-examine him? Pam barely hid her surprise. She hadn't expected that, but she welcomed it. Yes, Your Honor. A man stood from the back of the room. Officer Brian Calloway, a municipal enforcement officer. Middle-aged, dressed in a crisp navy uniform, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who rarely had to justify his decisions. Dalton gestured for him to step forward. The officer took the oath and sat down. Pam stood, walking toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Officer Calloway, can you confirm that you were the one who issued this violation? He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Pam turned slightly toward the jury box, empty, save for the public spectators watching intently. And on what basis did you determine a violation had occurred? Calloway exhaled, as if the answer was obvious. The statute is clear. The property in question was not in compliance with municipal code. I documented it and issued the fine. Pam clasped her hands behind her back. Did you take any photographs of the alleged violation? A pause. Then, no, ma'am. It wasn't necessary. A small, almost amused smile touched Pam's lips. You didn't document the violation, yet you issued a fine? Calloway shifted in his seat. I have years of experience identifying these cases. I didn't need a photo to confirm what I saw. Pam's expression remained calm, but inside, she knew she had just been handed her next argument on a silver platter. She turned back toward the bench. Your Honor, in the absence of photographic evidence, written witness statements, or any tangible proof, we are left with nothing more than an individual's subjective assessment. This directly contradicts the evidentiary standards required under the appellate clarification Judge Whitaker referenced earlier. Whitaker's expression didn't change, but he sat back slightly.
He knew she was right.
Pam pressed forward. So, I ask again, how does this court justify imposing a fine under a statute that lacks the required legal foundation for enforcement? The silence was deafening. Judge Dalton's fingers drummed against the bench. He wasn't looking at Whitaker, and that told Pam everything she needed to know. He had expected to win this argument. He had expected Whitaker's presence to back her into a corner. Instead, she had taken his own counterpoint and unraveled the case against her. Dalton exhaled sharply. This court will take another recess. Pam resisted the urge to smile. She knew exactly what was happening. They were running out of ways to push back. But when the court reconvened, what Dalton did next was something no one saw coming. Pam remained seated as the courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. Another recess. That wasn't a good sign for the judge. It meant he was struggling to regain control of a situation that had already slipped through his fingers. But she knew better than to celebrate too soon. Dalton was a man of authority. And if there was one thing people in power hated, it was being challenged. He wasn't going to back down that easily. When the court reconvened, Dalton's demeanor had shifted. Gone was the passive confidence he had walked in with earlier. Now his jaw was set, his expression unreadable. Whitaker was still seated beside him, though this time his posture was more reserved. It was clear he had no intention of intervening, at least not yet. Dalton cleared his throat. Miss Bondi, you've presented compelling arguments. His tone was measured, but Pam could hear the tightness in it. He wasn't used to admitting even the smallest concession. However, he continued, this court still finds that the core issue remains unchanged. The fine stands.